Well, good evening. They didn't give me a gavel, so I can't do the gaveling. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm Barbara Buffalo. I have the privilege of being the mayor of Columbia, Missouri. And I'm so thankful to see such a great turnout tonight. We're going to have the opportunity to hear from our 4 finalists for Columbia Police Chief. This is a fantastic time to be together and supporting this new leadership that our community is about to embark on. I'm so thankful to the city staff, City Manager DeCarlin Seawood, for doing both the open process. There's been a lot of community input, internal input, Columbia Police Department input, to getting us to where we are today. I'm so thankful, too, that not only are all of the questions that are going to be moderated tonight by David Lyle, who I'll introduce in a moment, were submitted from our citizens. They were submitted to us to be asked tonight. We have themes, obviously, within that. I do want to open up that there is going to be opportunity to give comment at the end. We're going to have comment boxes out in the lobby. So after our moderated forum at the beginning, you will have an opportunity to give that comment in there. As well as if your question that you have burning inside of your heart and your head today is not asked during the forum, we have a meet and greet happening with each of our candidates in 1A and 1B, the conference rooms next door. So if it's not asked tonight, please be prepared to ask them in there at that time. So before we begin, I do want to point out, we're obviously at a pivotal time. Public safety, law enforcement is not the same it was 30 years ago, 20 years ago, even in the last 10 to 5 years. Our police department right now, we're facing challenges with recruitment, with community violence, and more. So we're so thankful for those, our sworn officers who serve, as well as our community members who serve within public violence prevention. And what we're talking about as we go forward is who is going to help us lead the next generation of our community, and what does it mean for public safety? So please keep our open mind tonight as we're working. Listen thoughtfully, fully to the citizens' responses, but also to the community members and our candidates. I know that we all have our own lived experiences, we all have our own priorities, and I want to encourage all of us to be open and engage with one another with our whole hearts. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it off to our moderator tonight, David Lyle.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the city for asking me to do this. I'm a retired old man, so I don't have a dog in this hunt, and I've not met 3 of the candidates, and I've not interviewed the 4th candidate who's from here during any of my previous work on the radio. I think it is an important thing that we're doing tonight to be able, for most of us, to get our first look and a first sound from these candidates. And I think because of the nearly full room, it shows how important you all place this decision. I will say this, that the format is going to be, we'll have the candidates out here one at a time. You can probably guess that there were more than 5 questions that were turned in by those of you who had questions that you wanted to see presented to these candidates, but the city staff has boiled down the subjects and the questions to 5 questions. I will ask the same 5 questions of all 4 candidates. I will probably do minimal, if any, deviation from these questions so that they all face the same questions in the same way when it is their turn to be out here. After this is over, we will exit. You can veer to your left, and there'll be nice refreshments and also an opportunity for you to have a reception and to meet and to talk to the candidates individually. They will be ushered into a separate room for the TV and any radio or newspaper media to have a chance to talk with the candidates one at a time, but there should always be at least 3 candidates in the reception area, so it's not like you're going to miss the opportunity to have a chance to talk to all of them. So those are basically some of the opening statements as far as how this night will progress, and if you all are ready, I'm ready. So I think it's just a random order as to how they will come out, and our first candidate for the next police chief for the city of Columbia will join us right now. It's Dan Haley. Thank you. And we probably read about these candidates, and we probably have an idea of their background, but Rather than me going through that again and rather than me doing an introduction, our first challenge to you tonight is to introduce yourself to us in whatever way you'd like to.
Hello, everyone. Dan Haley. I grew up in Kansas City. With my mother and father. My father died when I was 5 years old of a cerebral hemorrhage, so I was raised by my mother. I have had an older brother that was 11 years older than me, and an older sister that was 15 years older than me. And my mother said when she found out that she was pregnant with me, she cried for 3 months. So I graduated from MU, where I met my wife, ring the bell for the Salvation Army, trying to meet girls. It worked too well. That's how I met my wife. We left here, graduated from MU, went to Kansas City, where I joined the police department. I've served there for 29 years. Most of my experience has been in patrol, working nights. I have a lot of administrative experience as of recently. So that's pretty much my story. I like to be involved with the community. I serve on numerous boards. I think I've served on as many as 6 nonprofit boards, and I've been the chair of most of them. So that's just a little bit about me. Let's get into this.
All right, we will. I'm going to probably tell all of the candidates this, the closer the better for that microphone. I know it's uncomfortable for a lot of people, but right up there so everybody can hear who's in the room as well as those who are watching or listening to us tonight. So question number 1 is, what strategies do you feel would be effective in addressing community violence and improving overall public safety in Columbia?
So for this position, I prepared a vision. I didn't want to come in here with no thoughts at all, of course, realizing that when I come here to Columbia, I have to look, learn, and listen first. However, I have to give you something, right? So there's a vision. Well, my vision is called for crime reduction is CPIR. Columbia Prevention, Intervention, Enforcement, Reentry, and Rehabilitation. It envelops the community concept of crime fighting, realizing that the police can't do it alone. We need the community to be involved. Various nonprofits in the community, various activists, various stakeholders, we all have to come to the table if we're going to address the violent crime problem that we have here in Columbia. So that's a big part of my vision, looking at community policing. However, some of the more interesting things that go along with this vision, looking at data and intelligence analysts, that helps with the staffing shortage that we have here in Columbia. When you have a data or intelligence analyst, they can gather a lot of facts using social media that a detective would normally have to do. This will free up your detectives to investigate the crime and bring this to prosecution. In addition to that, my strategies that I will be relying on would be hotspot policing, risk to brain modeling, focused deterrence, and in Omaha, they have a program, I don't know if you're familiar with it, called Omaha 360. Yes, Omaha is a larger city than Columbia, however, it still has relevance. What they've been able to do to bring down their violent crime problem and their homicide problem has been incredible. They've had really reduced the numbers, and it really is a community effort. So the way it works, if you're not familiar with it, is that they have a weekly meeting, and you have about 100 organizations and people in this meeting with the police department. The police department has a smaller role than what you would think. Police department will present for 15 minutes, take questions on some of the recent gun violence and things that had happened, and then they'll move on. This group, they'll then go into looking at, hey, what about employment? That's kind of a factor when you look at crime. What about education? That's kind of a factor. What about housing? I know you have a major homeless problem here. They pull everybody to the table. We all work together. We're going to pull in the rope in the same direction, and that's how we're going to do it with community policing, using some of these strategies to move forward and reduce the violent crime rate, if that makes sense, hopefully.
In your first answer, you've already hit upon a couple of the topics that we'll talk, and the first one is in this next question. Staffing shortages are a trend nationwide. How would you address recruitment and retention of qualified officers?
So part of my vision, like I said, is not a plan. It will only become a plan when I have input from the community and from the police department. But part of my vision, giving some ideas, that is one of the things that I addressed in the vision, the staffing shortage. We have to look at retention and recruitment. A lot of times retention is overlooked, but you're losing so many people that with the limited pool that you have to recruit from, you can't recruit enough people in here and have them, send them through the classes and get them trained to make that big of a difference that, hey, we're going to be to full staffing. You have to stop the bleed with retention. It's kind of like a patient. When someone's bleeding out, what do you have to do? Stop the bleed. That's what we have to do here first. We're going to focus heavily on retention. I'm not dropping the ball on recruitment. But unfortunately, most places, Retention is overlooked. So when you look at retention, I believe I did a part of this vision that'll be turned over to the city manager tomorrow. It's 10 pages of recruiting and retention. So part of that, you have to look at, you got to make it fun for people, right? You have to bring in some things. When you look at it in terms of the diversity aspect, there are affinity groups and affinity organizations that could be brought in just to help with the professionalism of policing and organization. Whether that's NOBLE, National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, whether that's NALI, National Association of Women Law Enforcement Executives, or whatever group that you bring in. But to just highlight some of these various groups where people can get together and work on their professionalism, especially when you look at diversity. Also, when you look at retention, I realized that recently you had a big pay raise, and that's great. But the bad news about that is that we're in a very competitive environment. So you're going to need to look at, again, within at least the next couple of years, having another salary survey done. Because just to stay competitive, that's going up. That's going up. What I have to tell you is that, just being honest, I know a little bit about HR because I'm in HR right now, and recruiting, the pool is different. We no longer have 100 people that are coming into the room and try to apply. We're going to have 20. We're going to have 15. But we have to go after them, make them feel important, and get them in there. But going back to the retention, because I don't want to get off that point so soon, we have to look at benefits. What about, you realize that with a department, half of your people are probably going to be working your evening shift and your night shift. What about their kids? Anybody ever thought of having a 24/7 daycare? Well, when you get with your community partners and you get with your business community and you find out, hey, well, this person, they have a daycare and it's pretty nice, and police officers already take their kids there. What about if we could get them to extend the hours? Address that. We could get them to extend the hours and make it a lot easier, especially for single parents. We have one daughter and I'm maxed out with one child, so I can definitely understand if I was a single parent what that would mean. But a 24/7 daycare, right? Also, let's be honest. We're not, this isn't 10 years back and where the money doesn't matter. Talk to your kids. Talk to your grandkids. The money matters. We're going to have to increase the benefits. Something that also we're going to have to look at, the retirement. The retirement and the pension, I know a lot of young people don't think about that, but when you look at retention, people may stay a few extra years if you add that incentive there. And so we have to look at how we're going to add various incentives, and we have to be real. We have to be real. I'm going to be honest. One thing you'll get from me as your chief when you ask me a question, it's going to be an honest answer. And it may offend some people sometimes, but it's going to be honest, and that's where I come from, and that's how I'm going to come here and build trust.
All right, well, here's the next question. Why is it important for a law enforcement agency to be accredited, and what would you do to ensure the Columbia Police Department works toward accreditation?
Part of my vision. Okay, so my vision is based on the 21st Century Policing Report. That is the foundation of my vision. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but under President Obama, he commissioned this study in policing to help police departments build better relationships with the community, better relationships internally as well. 21st Century Policing Report. It came out after the Brown incident in Ferguson. Well, there are pillars in this report, and I use that as a part of my foundation to build my vision. Like I said, this is a vision. I don't think I have all the answers. You have the answers, and the police department, those officers have the answers. I got to come here and get both of you together, get these answers together, and move forward to produce a strategic plan, but that's later down the road, but that is in the vision. So when we talk about accreditation in the vision, 21st Century Police Report, that's important. So of course, it's important to me, and like I said, it's in my vision. And I believe that as an agency, we have to move towards this accreditation because a main reason, it builds trust from the community. You're an accredited agency, we're following national best practices. That's why, one of the main reasons. I know CALEA has been looked at here before, and there have been some challenges. They've been working on it for quite some time. I don't know what those challenges are, all those challenges. That's why I have to come in here, look, learn, and listen. But I do plan to move the organization towards accreditation. So,
explain what CALEA is. I know that law enforcement officers use that pretty easily, but not everybody knows.
So CALEA is kind of the oldest and most popular accreditation organization for policing across the country. And so it represents the gold standard. But honestly, for multiple years, we haven't been able to achieve it here. So we have to look at why is that? What I can promise you as chief, I'll make it a priority. And I'll take on the responsibility to help with the project management to move this forward to make sure that we're getting it. And when we don't, if we don't get it, you've got to come to me and say, hey, chief, you said, I remember when you had that interview, you came up here to Columbia and you said, we're going to get accreditation. What are you doing? And that's where I'll be accountable. But I definitely believe we need to move in that direction, build that community trust.
Excuse me. One other follow-up question. You mentioned I think it's called 21st Century Police Report, or what is that? And not to tell us all about it, but just give us a brief thumbnail of what that includes.
So the 21st Century Policing Report, like I said, under President Obama, what he did was he commissioned some academics, some law enforcement executives, some attorneys, some professors, some statisticians, to look at policing and come up with best practices, basically a blueprint for how police departments could make the relationship with the public better during this time with the Mike Brown situation, to make community trust grow. And it had a lot of great things for police departments in there to do internally as well as externally to build this relationship. Officer wellness and safety, right? Yes, community policing and crime reduction. Technology and social media, just to name a few. But that's how you break it down. And when you look at an organization through my lens as a chief, these are areas that an organization has to hit to become organizationally excellent, which I know is a goal here.
Let's pick up on something you referred to in one of your first answers. Our community has seen a rise in the number of individuals experiencing homelessness or a mental health crisis. If you were the police chief, how would the Columbia Police Department work with city leaders and the community to address these challenges?
Homelessness is not a crime issue. It's a community issue. It's a social issue. What we have to do as a police department is work together with all of you and our agencies to work on this issue, if that makes sense. With a lot of times when you're dealing with homeless issues, there are a lot of problems that go along with that in terms of emotional problems, drug problems, alcohol problems that need to be addressed. That's not something that, I told you I'll be honest, the police department can address. We're not equipped to address a lot of these ailments, societal ailments, but our community partners, they're equipped to do this. Us working with these community partners, coming together, we can come up with a better way to address the homeless issue. And I say homeless, I mean unsheltered, should I say. It's unsheltered issue in Columbia. And that's how I would attack it, but bringing people to the table.
All right. Our fifth question, describe your relationship style and how you would work with groups such as the Citizens Police Review Board, Neighborhood Watch, and other various community groups?
You have some very passionate people in Columbia. Very passionate. And that's a good thing. And why is it good? Because they want to do something, right? Sometimes from what I've seen from some of the videos, well, maybe there was a better way to express it. However, they're engaged and they're passionate. I think as a leader, you have to have thick skin. You have to be willing to work with people. You meet them where they are. And even if they're not as open towards you, you have to be open and embracing and finding out, hey, I know you're here to make a difference. You're here to move the city forward. You're here to move the department forward. What can we do to work together? Find this common ground and move it forward. As a chief, I can't be sensitive. I know I'm going to be criticized. I saw your meetings. Oh, yes, I've seen these meetings. It's coming. But I prepared my whole life for this. I prepared to lead and to take on some of these challenges. I know it's hard to believe that in Kansas City, we have some groups that are not as happy either. I do pretty well meeting people where they are and bringing people together and making a difference.
You have gone through the 5 questions. Before I let you go, I just ask you, as I'll ask all the rest of the candidates, anything you want to leave us with that you haven't been able to address?
If I'm selected to be your chief of police, I'd be very honored. Why? The passion that you have, I know we can get some things done. When you have people that engage, that's half the battle. A lot of times you have people, believe it or not, they're just sitting back. They're not standing up in the back row attending these community meetings. They're not sitting here like waiting for answers and seeing what people have to say, trying to make some type of judgment whether this would be a good candidate to be our chief or our leader. That's not what I see today, and that's not what I've seen on your meetings. Interesting. I'll leave it at that.
Dan Haley, thank you. That's candidate number 1 for the police chief position.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before we bring out our next candidate, you're excused, sir. And we have some seats up in the front if anybody wants to sit rather than stand. It's kind of like a church. You come here after the first hymn and you get to come up front and sit there if you want to. It is, isn't it? And also, I guess I should have reminded people, although it slips my mind, to silence your phone, or you might entertain us all with whatever you have as your ringtone. Let's welcome Jill Schluty as our second candidate. Take the microphone. And we will let you, in whatever way you would like to, introduce yourself to this crowd tonight.
Good evening. My name is Jill Schluty. I am an 18-year employee of the Columbia Police Department. Actually, my 18-year anniversary was yesterday. So I made it that far. Yeah, thank you. I have lived in Columbia since 1995. I came here to go to school, and like a lot of other people, I did not leave. I really liked it here. I'm originally from St. Joseph, Missouri, so I came here to go to MU. And I ended up graduating from Columbia College, and I went to graduate school at Stevens College, so I do have some dabbling in the educational realms here. But I'm super excited to be here. I'm flattered that I'm here, and I'm very anxious to talk to all of you and answer whatever questions David has.
All right. Well, these are questions that have been compiled from feedback from the community. And so question 1, what strategies do you feel would be effective in addressing community violence and improving overall public safety in Columbia?
So I think the first thing we have to talk about is what the actual problems are, and that's going to involve data-driven approaches, right? So we're going to have some really deep looks into what is happening in what areas of town, why it's happening there, and how we need to deploy resources to deal with those things. I often find that we have things here in Columbia, whether it's this issue, other issues, where sometimes it's like this is all the police's problem. And I think over the years, thankfully, I've seen us really adapt that mindset and say, no, the police can't do this by themselves, because we can't. You're going to hear me say the word collaborative a lot, probably to the point you're going to get irritated with it. But we have to collaborate with other people in the community to deal with this issue. It's got to be a balance between proactive action, proactive action based on intelligence. We know a lot of the folks that are involved in these things. It is a very small percentage of our community that engages in violence, but we have to have a holistic approach to dealing with those folks. So one of the approaches that I'm very interested in, and I would encourage you to look at, is Omaha 360. So Omaha, Nebraska has kind of instituted this idea that if the police department works with a lot of the nonprofits, a lot of the community groups, and everybody gets together and says, how are we going to approach this problem? Here's the problem. We're going to lay it out. We're not going to sugarcoat the problem, but what are we all going to do in our little corner of the world to try to deal with this? But we're all going to do it together, and we're going to do it in a way that we're going to use data, and we're going to use collaboration to try to look at the best way we can approach that. I'm also a big fan of focused deterrence. We started down the focused deterrence road here at the police department. Several of us here and several service providers went and watched the focused deterrence program in action in Kansas City. They do a very large, robust program. Obviously, they have quite a bit more violent crime than we do. But when we looked at that program here, we said, how can we personalize this program for Columbia? And we made a lot of inroads with that. We've had some stumbling blocks, but I think I've had some time speaking with Roger Johnson, our new prosecutor. He's very amicable to looking at that program again. And if you're not familiar with it, the basic approach is that we know who is committing a lot of our acts of violence. We go to those people, we say, hey, you're either going to be a suspect or probably a victim, because a lot of those same folks end up being victims, unfortunately. We want to offer you services. What do you need? Do you need to find a job? Do you need help with stable housing? Do you need help with educational assistance, on-the-job training? We try to do all those things, and then if we offer those services and they turn us down and say, nope, I prefer to be a criminal and I'm going to continue to prey on the community, well, then we know which direction we're going to take. But again, that's going to involve different groups and different people assisting us with that. We can't do that by ourselves.
Second question has to do with staffing shortages, which are a trend nationwide. How would you address recruitment and retention of qualified officers?
So as we sit here today, we are short 33 people at the police department. That represents teetering on 20% of our sworn staff that works out on the street. That is a scary number. Everybody knows we could sit here and talk about the same things over and over. Law enforcement's dealing with COVID. The job's not attractive anymore. But I think we are going to have to look at, number one, processes. We work in an environment now where the folks that we're trying to get to put in an application, they want information quickly. They don't want to wait 9 months to get a job. It takes, a lot of people need a job now. So if I can't apply for something on my phone, I saw a study recently that said the current generation, if they can't actually apply for a job on a mobile device, 40% of them will just say it's not worth my time. So I think we're going to have to look at new and innovative ways to reach people, whether that's through increased social media presence, geofencing social media presence, directing things more at service orientation. When I became a police officer, a lot of the videos were, come be on the SWAT team, right? Do all this cool car chases and stuff. Those are great things, but a lot of the folks we see that are engaging in this job now are really service-minded, and they are less interested in that and more interested in how can I make a positive impact in my community. I think we're going to have to look very deeply at those things and how we market the job to people and how quickly we can get them in the door. We're competing for the same pool of applicants, but we're not going to get enough people to fill spots if our plan of action is just to constantly one-up Boone County Sheriff's Department's salary. That's not a plan. That's a Band-Aid. So I think we're going to have to look at how quickly we can get people in the door, how quickly we can get them in a car and trained. We have a lot of great things. We've worked with the Human Resources Department here at the city, has done an outstanding job of trying to help us speed that process up. But I think there's other things we can look at. If you don't have, or if you do have college hours, if you have a certain number of college hours, some places are waiving you having to take a written exam. You just go right into the interview process. I think there's a lot of innovative things we can do and build on here. And I think we also internally have to talk more about officer wellness, which includes mental health checkups, which includes making people feel like they're in a safe place where they're valued, their opinions are valued, their ideas are valued, and they're incorporated into the way the police department runs.
Question number 3, why is it important for a law enforcement agency to be accredited? And what would you do to ensure the Columbia Police Department works toward accreditation?
So CLIA is the main accreditation you'll see departments use. Accreditation is important because it really allows us to function under a set of agreed upon standards. So a lot of agencies get involved in accreditation just like a lot of other things too, right? Accredited colleges. You don't go to a college that's not accredited because a lot of times it doesn't mean as much to people, right? So when you become accredited as a law enforcement agency, you're saying, hey, we're interested in best practices, gold standard approaches to how you do things, because that organization is constantly looking at what's the best way to do something, what's the new way to do something, what's the proven way to do something that meets community expectations, risk management, best practices. It's important, I think, to everybody in the community that we engage in things like accreditation, because we're saying we care enough to make sure that we're providing you a top-notch service. Accreditation is not easy. It takes a commitment. I think it's important. I think it makes us more transparent in how we do our jobs. It's a lot easier to say to you when you get asked, how do we do X? Of course, we have a policy on something, but when you're accredited, it's a lot easier to point to why you do something the way that you do it. I think internally we're going to have to make it a priority. It's going to take, again, collaboration with everyone in the police department and community input on policies. CLIA is huge on community input as you go through the process. So it's just a matter of making it a priority and getting it done.
Our community has seen a rise in the number of individuals experiencing homelessness or a mental health crisis. If you were the police chief, how would the Columbia Police Department work with city leaders and the community to address these challenges?
So I think this past year, our point in time count on homeless individuals was around 335 people here in Boone County, which we know most of them are in Columbia, right? So I think we're going down some good roads. Again, you're going to hear me use the C word again, collaboration. The homeless problem can't be laid on the front porch of the police department. We are just part of that. We're just part of that solution in some cases. We get pulled in a lot of different directions on this issue, and really we can't solve it on our own. I think there are some good things happening. I think the Opportunity Campus being a place that could eventually provide services. We just came back from a trip in Madison, Wisconsin. Almost, I would say 75% of that trip was centered around homelessness issues. We saw some very interesting things that they did there. And the thing that I took away from that trip was it was a total collaborative effort between city government, which includes all parts and pieces, and the community. The city did not do it on its own. In fact, they said when they tried, they failed. So that was one of the things they learned from that, and I think that we're going to have to learn from here, honestly. And another comment that someone made up there that I thought was really interesting was that when a person comes to this community, even if they're a homeless individual, they are now a member of that community. And so I think we need to treat them as a member of this community and work with them in that respect. But we also have, it's a balance, right? We have business owners that are concerned. We have people that live in homes that are concerned. And so we have to take everybody's view into consideration. And I think if everyone works together on this issue, we can find middle ground and not be so far out on the edges. There's some great things on the horizon, I think, that we're looking at. And I think you might bring it up later, but I think mental health co-response is a huge part of that. That was a program we saw up there. We are in the very end stages of getting that up and running here, but mental health co-response will really take us a long way, I think, in dealing with that population, because the police only have so many resources. We can go to your trespassing call. We can go to the folks that someone doesn't like them sitting in the lobby of their business too long. But a lot of times with folks, there's an underlying mental health issue. That's not my expertise, right? So the co-response model is very important, and I think it's going to go a long way to helping us address this problem.
Well, go ahead and define what that is. What's a mental health co-response?
So the program that we're looking at here in Columbia involves a mental health practitioner that actually sits in 911 Joint Communications and kind of helps triage the calls coming in and helps us decide, is this a response that requires an armed officer to go with a mental health practitioner, or is this something a mental health practitioner can handle on their own? Because we run a very wide gambit of things here, and we get a lot of calls about these things. But we're not the experts in mental health things. We dabble in how to help people and how to put Band-Aids on things, but most of us are not trained mental health practitioners, so we have to bring in experts to help us. I think it will greatly reduce our call volume in some of these areas and help free up time for officers to have, hopefully, more time to do community-based policing.
Describe your relationship style and how you would work with groups like the Citizens Police Review Board, Neighborhood Watch, and other community groups.
So way back when, seems like forever ago, I was actually a liaison to the Citizens Police Review Board as a sergeant. So in one of my former jobs, I was the public relations unit sergeant. I was the liaison to the board. My job was to go into the meetings and provide them with any information that they needed or go back and find information for their next meeting. I really liked that role. It was a challenge because it was something that was fairly new. I found people on that board really wanted to be there and work on issues with the department. To back up even further than that, when the board was first kind of in its beginning phases, I was a member of the police union. I was actually the vice president of the police union, and we had very deep internal conversations about how we were going to approach that topic, and we all decided as a group that it was the best thing for Columbia because it was only add to transparency for the department. And so moving forward, as I saw that from the other side, now not being part of the union, but being more a supervisor, it was very interesting to see how those folks, I think, wanted to help us improve our ability to be transparent. I think working with people like that is going to be key to forming relationships that we need to execute things like violence intervention, dealing with homeless folks, because people have to feel like we're being open and transparent about things to the extent that we can. Neighborhood Watch, I go and talk to them, presented to their group. Love going to neighborhood meetings. That's one of my favorite things to do, just because I always get asked a really interesting question. But I really just think being out there and being in the community and talking to people and finding out what they're concerned about, it's different from neighborhood to neighborhood. That's what's very interesting about Columbia. You can go to a meeting and think, I'll prep myself for something that I think's coming, and that is not what people are most concerned about. So listening's a huge thing, obviously.
Well, you've gone through the 5 questions that we have written, so we just ask a final comment, anything that you'd like to leave this group with before we move on?
I would say I am so glad the room is full. I can't tell you how important it is that everyone is engaged in this process. This is a huge part of our city, and I'm honored to be at this stage. I think that I am probably the most ready to do this job at this point in my career, and I feel like I could come in tomorrow and hit the ground running. I know the community. I've been here. I know the things that we've done successfully, the things that we could do better, and I think we have an outstanding staff of people that want to work very hard to make this community better, and I'm definitely ready to lead them to that end.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jill Sluty, our second candidate. Just a reminder that when we're done here, again, there will be a reception with all the candidates, and that will be in a room that as you go out, it'll be to your left. But then I also want to reiterate what was said earlier, that you can leave comments. So this is, for most of us, if not all of us, our first impression of these candidates in this setting. So if you have some comments or reactions to what you're hearing and seeing tonight, then leave them in the comments at the tables right outside the main doors. Our next candidate is Michael Zeller. As we're doing with all the candidates, rather than me reading an introduction, we'll give you a chance to introduce yourself however you would like to this group tonight.
All right, well, thank you all for being here. This is a terrific turnout. My name is Mike Zeller, so I'm from Greeley, Colorado. Greeley is a city of about 113,000, about an hour north of Denver. Greeley, I think, has a lot of parallels to Columbia. It's a very diverse community. We have a university in our community. So during my time there, I've done pretty much everything in law enforcement. I've done patrol investigations, community policing. So what drew me to this job is I grew up in the Kansas City area. So I've been to Columbia many times, most recently this spring. So when the position opened, I saw the profile and some of the opportunities and challenges that you all are facing, and I think with my experience and background that I have a lot to offer to help work with the team here to solve some of those things. So thank you again for being here.
Let's get to the questions that are provided from the staff's reading of the community. What strategies do you feel would be effective in addressing community violence and improving overall public safety in Columbia?
So I think it's a multiple-pronged approach to deal with violent crime. In most communities, you have a very small number of people who are career criminals, people that make their living committing crime. So one of the strategies is to identify those people and spend your time and resources, building cases and trying to arrest them. And then the second thing, I think there are places that contribute to crime. So I'm a big believer in using data, and through that you identify those places that are prone to having crime, and you devote resources to that. this is all prefaced on you have to have community relations. You can't have a heavy-handed enforcement strategy without building that trust with the community. The community's vital to identifying problems, and then they're vital to working with the police to help solve them. So I think targeting places, people, but the foundation of all of that is community relations and that strong bond.
Staffing shortages are a trend nationwide. How would you address recruitment and retention of qualified officers?
So that is an issue across the country. Where I work, we've had a lot of success in doing better nationally than a lot of our peers. And obviously pay and benefits are a critical piece of attracting people to law enforcement. It's a very, very difficult job. In Colorado, a couple of years ago, we had police reform legislation. There are a lot of good things that came out of that, but that made recruiting even more challenging. So I think what we've done in our department, beyond paying people fairly and doing those sorts of things, is having a strong culture. So I think as the chief, your job is to advocate for the community, but it's also to advocate for your officers, build a culture where they know that they're valued and appreciated. And then I think the third piece is to provide robust training. One of the things that people tell us when we interview new officers is they're attracted to our department because of the training and then the family atmosphere. So I think having a well-rounded agency that offers, career progression and opportunities for people to be engaged with the community and be well trained, I think that's a critical piece just beyond, the pay and benefits. So that would be something I would hope to bring to the department if selected for this role.
Why is it important for a law enforcement agency to be accredited, and what would you do to ensure that the Columbia Police Department works toward accreditation?
So I'm a big believer in accreditation. I think part of that building trust and legitimacy with the community is to have an outside set of eyes look at your policies and procedures and practices. So I'm a strong proponent of accreditation. We talked this morning about CALEA accreditation versus state level accreditation. So my agency, when I started there in 2001, was CALEA accredited. That's the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. That's the gold standard, but it also takes a ton of time and resources from your department to achieve that. So in Colorado, we have a state level accreditation through our Chiefs of Police Association. And in my opinion, we've been able to get about 90% of the benefit of accreditation, and it's not pulling people from, working with the community, being out on the street to meet those standards. So I think in Missouri, from my research, that state level accreditation is not maybe as robust as it is in other states. So if I was selected as the chief, that's something that I would want to look into, because you have a lot of small communities around here, and they definitely don't have the resources to pursue a national level accreditation. So I think a good middle ground is to have a very robust and dynamic state level accreditation. And that's something that I would strongly look into if I was selected.
Let's move on to this question about homelessness. Our community has seen a rise in the number of individuals experiencing homelessness or mental health crisis. If you were the police chief, how would the Columbia Police Department work with city leaders and the community to address these challenges?
So that, again, is an issue that we're dealing with across the country. In my own community, I've looked at the point in time count, which is the number of homeless in the community. Ours is very comparable to Columbia. I think Columbia is at a point where if you take aggressive steps to deal with it now, you can potentially solve the problem. If it keeps growing year after year, then it may get to the point where you can't, solve the problem completely. So in my experience, I was on the board for our community mental health center for 6 years. I helped write a grant to start our co-responder program. So I think law enforcement's role is to work with other city departments, other community partners to proactively contact people experiencing homelessness and first offer them resources. And if people want to take those resources, obviously the community has to, have the means to provide the help that people are seeking. For those people that don't want help and refuse help, at some point police may have to enforce the law. That's not a first choice because you're not going to arrest your way out of the homeless issue. But, there's also a community safety issue. I think, we have an obligation to ensure that people can use our parks, people can patronize our businesses downtown. So law enforcement has a critical role to play in that, but it is definitely a community-wide problem, and it's going to take everyone at the table to resolve that.
Just to follow up on, you mentioned co-responder. How was that used? What did that mean where you are?
Sure. So our co-responder program is through a partnership with our community mental health center, and they respond with our officers to calls when people are experiencing a mental health crisis, and they offer resources to people that want to accept them. I think one of the areas co-responder programs can grow is in the follow-up, because they often deal with the same person over and over again. So the next stage of that we're looking at in our community is like a peer intervention program. So these are peers, people who have had lived experience dealing with some of these issues, and then they follow up with these individuals to hopefully steer them towards the resources that the community is offering. So it's not just one and done, contact someone, offer them resources, and then never talk to them again. To be effective, you have to do the follow-up. And then the next evolution of that is just having responders directly respond, so not a co-responder model, but more of a direct response. So in Denver, Colorado, they have the STAR program, which is Support Team Assisted Response, and they basically work through dispatch, and they will directly respond to calls without law enforcement. So that's, I think that's the next evolution. One of the things that I'm involved in, I'm on a state task force that advises the Colorado legislature on issues with behavioral health in the criminal justice system. One of the things that we've proposed to them is to fund some pilot programs to try the STAR model in some smaller communities to see if that will work. I think as we go forward, that's going to be a continued evolution of law enforcement, is to avoid getting people involved in the criminal justice system if at all possible, and use that as a last resort.
Next topic, describe your relationship style and how you would work with groups like the Citizens Police Review Board, Neighborhood Watch, and other various community groups.
So as I said initially, Greeley, where I currently work, is a very diverse community. Our population is approximately 40% Hispanic. 26% of our households, the primary language is a language other than English. So I've spent my career working with diverse communities. In our community, we do not have a citizens review board. We have a advisory committee, a Latino advisory committee. We meet with them regularly. We talk about the good stuff and the bad. I'm the type of individual that if we make a mistake, I'm going to own that. And I'm going to be transparent about it, and you get bad news out there, and hopefully as you develop principled relationships with people, you can get through those things. And in my opinion, I think that's a key to policing in any community, is building those strong relationships, and that's the foundation of how you police the city. Then when bad things do happen, hopefully there's some trust there and we can work through it. So I think that's vital for the department. Community policing is, that's the way we should police. That takes people. We talked about staffing earlier. Community policing is a very resource-intensive endeavor, because if we want our officers out there problem solving in the community, you have to have the officers to do that. If their whole shift is spent just reacting to to incidents. They're not going to have the time to interact with citizens, neighborhoods, getting to know the people that they're working with. So I think if you solve the staffing issue up front, that will lead to a lot of good things, including those community partnerships that we're all seeking.
You've gone through the 5 questions that we have, the official questions, and I'm letting each of the candidates have an opportunity to say whatever you'd like in closing. What would you like to leave with this group?
I just want to say again, thank you all for being here. That's one of the things I've been really impressed with in Columbia is just the amount of engagement. I think this is a terrific opportunity and a terrific community. You have a great group of candidates. I'm honored to be amongst them. I think I have a track record of dealing with a lot of the challenges that this community's facing in a similar community with a lot of the same challenges. None of these problems are solved overnight and instantly. Once a new chief's named, it's not going to be solved in a week, but I'm willing to do the work and get out there and engage with all of you and hit the ground running. So thank you again for the opportunity.
We thank you for being here. He's Michael Zeller. I'll just remind you, I mean, we're hearing these questions, getting ready to hear them for the 4th time. They have not heard the questions, so they don't know what the questions are. So this will be the first time for our next candidate, and he is Nathaniel Clark. Welcome. We welcome you and would invite you, rather than me introduce you to the group, how would you introduce yourself to this group tonight?
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address you tonight. I am Nathaniel Clark, and I am excited about being in the great city of Columbia. I've come to you by the way of Georgia. I'm a seasoned police chief with over 37 years of law enforcement experience. I'm a graduate of the FBI National Academy, a graduate of SMIP, Southern Institute for Police Executives, taught at Harvard. And I just recently got back from Israel, where I attended the GILEAD program, which is Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange Program, seeing how they do things in Israel versus how we do things in the United States. You know, when I think about this city, you know, I was chief in a city that's equivalent to the same demographics as Columbia, Fort Smith, Arkansas, the 2nd largest city in the state. So I come to you with an array of experience, and I make a pledge to you tonight. If I am your next police chief, I promise to give you 110% of me and expect no less from the men and women that work around me. Thank you again for allowing me to address you tonight.
Let's get to our questions, and we'll start with this one. What strategies do you feel would be effective in addressing community violence and improving overall public safety in Columbia?
Well, there's an array of strategies, but I'm going to tell you the strategies I use as police chief. You know, some issues are just too complex for the police department to handle alone. We need the support of the stakeholders. So I utilize the concept of community-oriented policing, building strong relationships and collaboration with you, the stakeholders of the city, bringing you to the decision-making table. And then we don't stop there. We create a strategic action plan. Think about it. You at the decision-making table, we are identifying problems together, and we're identifying solutions together. Not only do we stop there, once we create this strategic action plan, which I've already begun to start working on, it's a foundation as to where we want to be. We build relationships with other law enforcement agencies here with the college police departments, with the state police, with the sheriff department, and with you, our most important asset, the stakeholders of this great city. And then we maximize the use of technology, whether it's cameras, whether it's the future system. We maximize the use of technology because times have changed and we're living in the age of technology. So think about it. If we just use these concepts, and then lastly, but certainly not least, we have here in this great city a crime analyst. We take the analyst, that data, and we take it and we more or less utilize the concept of predictive policing and intelligence-led policing, where we can predict where the hot spots are. We can predict where the next crime is going to take place. And we take our resources and we put our resources in place, being proactive versus reactive. I have used these methods in every city that I have been to, and they have been successful. When I left the city of Fort Smith, Arkansas, we had an 8-year low in crime because we used these methods. When I left the city of Forest Park, Georgia, a 10-year low in crime because we used these methods. And then lastly, but certainly not least, we do something that probably hadn't been heard of before, sir. We utilize non-enforcement citizens contacts. Every time that you're stopped by an officer, it does not have to end up with a traffic citation. Every time you're stopped by an officer, it does not have to end up with an arrest. We use non-enforcement citizen contacts, and I'll just give you an example of one. Operation 1050. Every 50 minutes, if the officer is not busy, I expect the officer to get out of that police car and talk to you. What can we do better to enhance our service delivery for you? At the end of the day, you are our most important asset. You, the citizens of this great city.
Next question. Staffing shortages are a trend nationwide. How would you address recruitment and retention of qualified officers?
Sir, that getting in. So what we got to do is we have to be creative. We start talking about staffing shortages. But first and foremost, we have to stop the bleed internally. What do we do to stop the bleed internally? Yes, officers want to be compensated. They want to be given a fair wages. I understand that. But let me tell you something I've learned in my 37-year history in law enforcement. Officers want to feel appreciated. They want a voice. They want to be heard. They want opportunities for growth, for enhanced training, and then work with enhanced equipment so they can reach their fullest and most important maximum potential. So what I've done throughout my law enforcement career, first and foremost, I created a Chiefs Advisory Board, which consists of officers and civilian staff to make sure the officers had a voice in the day-to-day operation of the police department. Then we started talking about what can we do as far as recruitment and retaining these officers once we get them on board. We have to change our mindsets. We have to get away from what I call that warrior's mentality and utilize what I call the guardian mentality. Right now, if the police department was at maximum capacity, we would have 190 officers. We're 40 officers short, based on what I've been told. That still leaves 150. Everybody on the police department is a recruiter. Everybody know at least one person that will make a good police officer. So if everybody brought to the table one person, we'd have a waiting list. But we can't stop there because everybody in this room, we're going to reach out to you. You know at least one person that will be a good police officer. We want to start at home first, hiring people from this great city. So if everybody in this room brought one person to the table, guess what? We wouldn't have a staffing shortage anymore. We'd have a surplus. We have a waiting list of people trying to get on. Another thing we do as far as bringing on competent people and the brightest and the best, we start at an early age. We start in the Explorers program. We start in the PALS program. We start early on trying to attract the brightest and best individuals to serve you. You deserve nothing less. And as your police chief, I am willing to go the extra mile in order that you achieve the best results, to hire the best and brightest applicant to serve you, because you deserve nothing less.
Next topic. Why is it important for a law enforcement agency to be accredited? And what would you do to ensure the Columbia Police Department works toward accreditation?
Well, that's a good question. You know, as police chief, I've been the chief executive officer of 2 accredited departments. Let's just think, for example, Fort Smith, Arkansas, which is the 2nd largest city in the state, the same demographics as Columbia. The department was accredited, and our E911 dispatch was accredited. And we were working on getting our training academy accredited, which we would have had the trivector. So I'm familiar with the accreditation process. Accreditation in law enforcement is like the gold standard. You know, it focuses on policies. It focuses on best practices. Now think about it for one moment. There's not a person in this room who don't want their child to go to an accredited university. There's not a person in this room that when he or she gets sick, you don't want to go to a board certified doctor. So why wouldn't you want your police department to be accredited? We should be accredited, because think about it. It increases morale because the officers know we are an accredited agency. It decreases some of our complaints because when individuals start complaining about you're not doing things consistent with policies, oh no, we're doing things according to best practices, and we are an accredited agency. And think about it, there's probably less than 10% of the police department in this country who are accredited now. So it's important for us to be what I call a part of the gold standard, a part of the elite, and get this department accredited. So as your police chief, it would be my goal within the next 4 years to have the Columbia Police Department accredited. So our policies would be not just within the norm, but we'll be an accredited agency where our policies are nationally recognized. And then we'll hold the men and women of the department, we'll hold them accountable to comply with the policies. That's a win-win for the department, and it's a win-win for you as a member of this community. So I would do everything within my authority as police chief, based on my experience, to ensure we get this department accredited.
I just want to confirm that you're talking about CALEA.
Correct.
Okay. Our community has seen a rise in the number of individuals experiencing homelessness or mental health crisis. If you were the police chief, how would the Columbia Police Department work with city leaders and the community to address these challenges?
You know, I talked a little bit earlier about some issues are just too complex for the police department to handle by themselves. When we start talking about the homeless or those that with mental issues, this is one of those challenges. It's too complex for the police department to address by themselves. Again, we have to reach out to the stakeholders. We have to bring the stakeholders to the decision-making table. In other words, we got to have that round table meeting, or what I call PAC, police and community together. Not only do we stop there, we have to bring in mental health, social workers providers. They are key. We bring in other department heads because some of the issues that we are experiencing really does not fall under the umbrella of the police department, but because we're the most visible arm of city government, it stops at our door, and we have to address the problem. What I would do as police chief is several things. First, come up with a strategic action plan as to how we're going to address the homeless and the mental illness here in this city. And we do that by collaborating with you. Not only with you, we bring some of the homeless individuals to the decision-making table. Who know their needs better than they? They have to be at the decision-making table. That's critical. And then we will go one step further when we start talking about the homeless. You know, I talked about reaching out to social services. I talked to reaching out to mental health providers, because most of our people that's homeless, based on my research, is attributed to mental health issues and or drugs. We have to do something about this. Everybody's a vital part of this community. And we want to treat everybody fair in law enforcement, and we don't want to violate anybody's constitutional rights. But think about, where my rights stop, your rights begin. And that's what we have to think about. When we also start thinking about those with mental health issues, then I'm a strong believer in what I call conversion programs. Some people don't need to be incarcerated. They need rehabilitation because they have some mental challenges. We can't arrest our way out of this problem. We have to work together as a community and come up with viable solutions regarding the mental health and the social well-being of those that are homeless. Those are just some of the things we have to do. We have to work together as a community to solve this problem. It's going to happen overnight? No. But during my tour today, I see that this city is already being proactive because you've already obtained a facility to start housing some of those that are homeless. And that's a testament to you. And that's a testament to the city manager and the governing body, the mayor and the city council, that you have already recognized we have an issue. And we need to address this problem working together.
Describe your relationship style and how you would work with groups like the Citizens Police Review Board, Neighborhood Watch, and other various community groups.
You know, sir, during my tour as police chief, I've had an opportunity to work with numerous review boards, neighborhood watch groups, attending town hall meetings, because that's what a chief does. We have to do more than work from 9 to 5. I have to be visible at the schools, churches, and civic organizations, and working with an array of people. That's one of the duties of a police chief. My style is ensuring that my words align with my actions, ensuring that I'm transparent, ensuring that I value what you say, and that you're treated as equal partners. Think about it. We're in a partnership. We work together. We work together to identify problems, and we work together as far as coming up with solutions to identify our problems. Anytime, whether it's me or anybody served in a role as police chief, and he or she excludes the community, it'll never be a win-win for you. This job can never be about me or the men and women in blue. This job always has to be about the people that we serve. We serve you. And I will always say, we're not doing you a favor by serving you, and some of us get that attitude. You're doing us a favor by allowing us an opportunity to do so. So when I think about working with you, treating you as equal partners, making sure your voices are heard, inviting you to the decision-making table, whether we're going back and reviewing policy, whether it's disciplinary actions, or whatever we have within our realm that we're trying to achieve, bring you to the decision-making table. Let your voice be heard. And I can't stress that enough. Community-oriented policing. Let your voice be heard. We owe that to you, especially as a police chief when it starts talking about working with you as a community.
Well, you've gone through the 5 formal questions. Before we let you go, as I've done with all the other candidates, what would you like to leave with this group? Any final comments?
Well, again, I just want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address you. And I know tonight is a special night for you because you've heard from 4 good candidates. I pledge to you tonight as your police chief, like I stated earlier, to give you 110% of my efforts. I pledge to you to go the extra mile in order that everybody sitting in this room, every citizen, every guest that attends this city, I pledge to you to go the extra mile that you will achieve the best results. I'm going to say that again. I pledge to you that I will go the extra mile in order that you achieve the best results. I pledge to you to utilize my training, my experience, and my abilities as police chief to ensure that this department continues to be a world-class agency. I pledge to you tonight, as your next police chief, to have a shared vision approach. Again, it's not about me, it's about you. Anytime I put myself before you, you lose, and you should never lose. And again, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be a part of this process, and may God continue to bless each of you. Thank you.
He is Nathaniel Clark, our candidate for the chief position. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. So those are our 4 finalists that are the candidates to be the chief of the police department here in Columbia. You'll have your opportunity now to meet them, to talk with them. As I said a moment ago, I'm just going to reiterate as they get ready to go into the room over here that has nice refreshments and plenty of room for you to mill about. You can talk to these candidates, bring up questions, follow-ups that you would have loved to have asked in this setting. And then also don't forget to put your comments in the comment boxes that are just outside the doors that you entered through. Again, I've been told that they've rented the facility till 9 tonight, so And they'll probably let you go longer if you want to. And don't be surprised if one of the candidates disappears for a few moments, because TV and other media will have an opportunity in a separate room to talk with the candidates individually. They're not all four going to disappear at the same time. So I like that touch also. Thank you all for being here. It's a terrific turnout, and we appreciate your feedback.